Do you believe that Jesus rose from the dead? If you do, what evidence do you have? What are your reasons for believing? Maybe you don't believe. Maybe you're on the fence. Well, you've come to the right place. We're going to look at the minimal facts argument in this video to really consider, do we have evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ? Let's dive in. So today we're going to be looking at the minimal facts argument. And the minimal facts argument is exactly that. It is an argument that is made up of minimal facts. So in other words, what are the barriers to entry to even consider whether Jesus rose from the dead or not? And in principle, this argument is to suggest from history that there are 6 facts that are historically confirmed across multiple sources and that are reliable that we can consider to let us know that we have good reason for why we believe that Jesus of Nazareth indeed rose from the dead. We should also make note about this minimal facts argument that scholars from a wide variety of beliefs agree on the historical nature of these facts. Let's give you the bare bones of the argument, and then we'll look at each line for just a moment. So let's start by considering the minimal facts argument, and indeed that multiple scholars from across many different backgrounds, philosophies, and beliefs agree with the historicity, or in other words, the nature of the argument because of its historical reliability of the 6 things that we're going to discuss right now. So what are those 6 things? The first is that Jesus indeed did die by crucifixion. The second is that his followers had real experiences seeing him risen. The third is that his followers' lives were transformed even to the point that they were willing to die. The fourth point is that the resurrection was taught very early, very soon after the crucifixion. The fifth point is that James, the half-brother of Jesus who was not a believer, became a Christian. And the sixth point is that Saul ended up converting to the one we know, Paul. So those are the 6 minimal facts. So before we even go into them, that's them in order, and that's what we're going to look at in this video. So let's consider briefly each fact one at a time and look at each and see whether this makes sense. Is it logically coherent? And what we can get out of this. So the first fact, that Jesus died by crucifixion. Jesus of Nazareth, historically speaking, and dying by crucifixion is one of the most reliable things that we have in our history. It is attested by multiple sources, as all of these arguments are. All of these points within this minimal facts argument indeed build on one another, and they are attested by multiple sources. And the first is that Jesus of Nazareth did indeed die by crucifixion at the hands of Pilate. The second point of this argument is that Jesus' followers did indeed see him risen. This is, of course, the claim, right? And we have good reason to believe this. One of the reasons why we believe that they had real experiences with Jesus after he rose from the dead, and that these were not some type of hallucination or anything, is not only do we have the evidence of there's little to no evidence about multiple people in a group setting having a hallucination. You have to remember that Jesus appeared to people not just in single moments, but also in groups as well. He appeared in the upper room. He also appeared to more than 500 at one time. The possibility that Jesus would have appeared to these in some type of hallucinatory way has no grounds in anything that we really know. The third point, that the apostles' lives were transformed after the resurrection of Jesus, ultimately noting that they must have seen Jesus. We have good reason to believe this. Not only do we see the apostles' lives transformed and going from bereaved, sad, certainly very confused about why their Savior would be crucified when he's come to save them. Why would he be crucified? They go from these type of characteristics to then we see them preaching boldly, spending their entire lives dedicated to the pursuit of teaching the gospel, and ultimately the vast majority of the apostles died a martyr's death. Most people are willing to die for the truth, and these were indeed willing to die for the truth. The fourth point, that the resurrection was not some fable that was taught hundreds and hundreds of years later in church tradition, but that the resurrection was taught very early on after the crucifixion. This was something that wasn't just written about 500 years later, something that was maybe whispered 200 years later down the road. This was something that was taught very soon after the crucifixion, that Jesus indeed did rise from the dead and that he was seen by many. The fifth point, that James, the half brother of Jesus, who was not a believer while Jesus was alive, ultimately had his own experience with a resurrected Jesus and became a Christian. How else could we explain why James would not be a believer in the life of Jesus, but then ultimately be a believer in the death of Jesus? And the sixth and final point, similar to the fifth one, we have Saul, who would ultimately become Paul after having his own experience with Jesus, who would be converted to Christianity. Saul, of course, played a huge role in the pursuit, capture, and even approval of the killing of Christians. Ultimately, he would become a Christian and write many letters and epistles in our New Testament that we have today. So there you have it. You have 6 minimal facts, the minimal facts argument about the resurrection of Jesus. These 6 facts are a minimum barrier to entry of historical findings that we have in multiple sources that lay out a case for us to give some type of explanation for what actually happened in the first century. And based on the case that we have here, we're left with very little reason to not believe that Jesus indeed did rise from the dead. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel. We'd love to bring you more content like this. And until next time, we'll see you.